So far in this series, we have covered the very basics of working with CSS. We started by looking at how to actually associate CSS with HTML documents. Then we looked at the different types of selectors. We saw that there is a universal selector, class selector, and also the ID selectors. And then we went to look at how to work with colors and backgrounds in CSS, after which we looked at paddings, margins, and also borders. After that, we also looked at how to style links in CSS so that our links can look more beautiful. And then we look at the clear and the float properties, after which we then looked at the CSS positioning property. There's still quite a lot for you to learn when it comes to CSS, but what I am now going to do is actually walk you through the process of building a responsive website so that we can apply all the things that we've learned so far to actually bring out a website that is presentable. In that way, you are also going to learn more things that we've not talked about, but I'll be explaining them as we go along. I think this would be a more effective way for you to learn how to use CSS to build websites. So we are going to be converting the website that we built in part 1 of this series. We're going to make it responsive and more presentable. We're going to be getting rid of all what we have here and just build everything again from scratch. Alright, so let's get into the code and get started. Come over to my text editor, and I'm just going to get rid of the things that I don't need. To get rid of all of this, I'm just going to leave the main div. Alright, so I have the main container div here. Get rid of this tie, and then I'm going to give a class here. I'm going to call this container. This is going to be the main container. All other content will be inside here other than the footer, which will be outside. The first thing that I want to do inside of the container is to actually add the header element. This is actually part of the HTML5 semantics. So in HTML5, we can actually just use this tag to say this is an header inside of the document. So inside of the header, I'm going to create a nav tag. Nav tag is used to actually create navigation, like our menu. So with this, we know that this is a nav tag, and it is much easier for search engines to actually crawl your website and know what each of the specific tag represents. So when they see this, this is the header on line 17, and line 18 is the navigation. So inside of the navigation, we're going to have an unordered list, and then we are just going to have 3 LIs. So the first one is going to be the link to the home page. So it's going to be ahref to be index.html, and then the text will be home. So I'm going to duplicate this. The next one is going to be books, and then the last one is going to be contacts. So just update the text. This will be books, and this will be contacts. Alright, so that's it for the menu. Let's do a refresh on the browser. Alright, so now we just have this unordered list here. The next thing that we are going to do is to create a section in our document. Right, so this section is going to hold the image and some other text that we'll be adding for this new design. Alright, so let's just put a comment here. So this should be section 1. Let's give this a class. We're going to give this a class of euros. Inside of the section, we are going to use another HTML5 tag, which is called main. This is used to designate the main content inside of a specific section or inside of a document. So this is going to be main, and what we're going to have here is going to be an image. Okay, so for now, we're going to leave it like this. And then also here, we're going to use another HTML5 element, which is an aside. An aside is usually used for things like a side menu, which will just be towards the right or the left of the web page. Okay, so we're going to have some text here. And then we are also going to have another section. Okay, so for now, I'm going to leave it like this. So if we go back again and do a reload, nothing has actually changed. So what we now need to do, because we want to build a responsive website, we need to lay down the groundwork for the CSS. So I'm going to create a new CSS document here. and I'm going to call this shared style. Okay, so the style rules that we're going to define here will be those that will be shared among the 3 pages that we're going to have here. We have books, we have contact, and we have index. So the CSS that we want to be shared among these 3 pages, we are going to actually write them inside of this shared_style.css. Alright, so let's come again to custom. I'm going to select and delete everything here. Okay, so we don't have any style right now. Alright, so let's do a refresh on the page. So all the styles are gone. Let us now begin to write the style for the new design. The first style that we want to write here will be for the container. So we're going to target that container. We want the container width to be 90% of the entire screen. And then we want to give a margin 0 and then set it to auto. With this, the container will always be at the center of the page, right? Because the width here is 90%. When we give a margin of 0 and auto, it will place this container at the center of the page. Let's quickly illustrate this. Let's set the height to be 100 pixels and then give it a border 1 pixels solid red. Alright, so we're going to add it to the index.html at the very top here. So instead of custom, we're going to change this now to shared. And then let's refresh the page. Okay, you can see we have the container here and it is right now placed on the center of the page. So if we go back and then remove margin auto 0 and then do a refresh, you can see that it moves to the left hand side of the page. Setting the margin to 0 and then auto, when the width is not 100%, will automatically position that element in the center of the page. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. For this particular element, what we want to do is to set a minimum height. So we want to say the minimum height for this element should be 100%. Okay, if we bring back the border, then let's do a reload. Okay, so you can see that we still have the element here. The height has not increased. If you look at the CSS, we set the minimum height to be 100%, but it is still actually taking the height of the content of the div. Okay, so if we want this to be always 100%, what we need to do is to come back here and then target the HTML. So HTML tag, and then we can also just target the body tag together. The height should be 100. If we give the body a height of 100, it means that this can now scale to 100% at a minimum height. So if we do a reload, you can see now that it scales to 100% minimum height. Alright, so this is what we actually want to achieve. We want this to always be minimum 100% height of the entire page. So a couple of things that we need to do also for the body tag and the HTML tag is to set the padding to 0. So we don't want any padding for this, and we also don't want any margin. So we set padding and margin to be equal to 0. So by the time we do a reload, you'll see that the space that is on the top here will be actually removed because now we have actually set the padding to be 0. Alright, so let's get back to text editor. And then here we can get rid of this border because we already know that the height is always going to be 100% at a minimum level. So we can remove this, and then we want to set the padding left to be 2 pixels. And also we want to set the padding right to be 2 pixels. Padding right should be 2 pixels. And then I want to actually give this a boss shadow. Like the name sounds is actually to just add shadows around the container itself. Okay, so this is a CSS3 properties that allows us to add shadow around the particular element. So I'm going to set this to 0, 2 pixels, then 4 pixels, then 3 pixels, and then the color that I want to use, RGBA 0, 0, 0, command 0.2. So this is going to be something light gray. The first value that I have here for the boss shadow 0 will be the offset X, while the 2 pixels that I have here, the second value will be the offset Y. The third one will be the blur radius, and then the fourth one will be the spread radius, while the fifth value here is the actual color. So this can actually be any color. If you don't want to use RGBA, you can use red, you can use green, whatever color that you want to use, but I want to use RGBA. Alright, so let's do a reload on the page. Okay, so you can see that the container now have the shadow around it.